بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده على هدايته ونشكره على عنايته ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنام حبيب إله العالمين الذي بعثه الله رحمة للعالمين محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the 14th program in the 2021 Ramadan series. قال الإمام الحسن عليه الصلاة والسلام هلاك المرء في ثلاث الكبر والحرص والحسد. فالكبر هلاك الدين وبه لعن إبليس، والحرص عدو النفس وبه خرج آدم من الجنة، والحسد رائد السوء ومنه قتل قابيل هابيل. There are three characters that, if one has them, lead to the total destruction. First, arrogance. Because once one has arrogance, arrogance leads to the destruction and corruption of faith. And it was the cause of Iblis being sent out and being cursed. Then greed. It is adu nafs, an enemy of the soul. And finally, envy, al-hasad, ra'id al-su. If you were to have them, it takes you to nothing but corruption. And hasad, or envy, was the cause of the two sons of Adam, one killing the other. Today is, for some people, the 15th of the month of Ramadan, already half of the month gone, and others celebrated it yesterday. It's the anniversary of the birth of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. So I offer my heartfelt congratulations for the occasion to our living Imam as well as all brothers and sisters. I start with the recap again because some of the issues that I addressed, I pointed out last night, they were extremely critical, that we will be using them in our lecture tonight as well. I mentioned that if we go to the Holy Quran, because we are driven to find out if there is anything in the Seerah of the Holy Prophet and the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet, some kind of a guidelines that would take us out of the debilitating crisis that we are dealing with today, these days. And I mentioned that Quran, if we look at the Quran, it gives three different images of the Holy Prophet. Number one, the humanistic image, constantly emphasizing on the fact that the Holy Prophet was a human being like everybody else. So that a number of verses, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ أَنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. The only difference between the Holy Prophet and everybody else is that he receives revelation, otherwise the core is the same humanity. Number two, in some passages, we see verses in the Holy Quran pointing out a unique characteristics of the Holy Prophet, a noble characteristic. إِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, as rahmatan lil alameen, etc., etc. So these passages create some kind of veneration for the Holy Prophet. And the third image is as the living Quran, Al-Quran al-Natiq, that the Holy Prophet exemplifies and typifies or embodies the entire essence of Quran. I mentioned last night that as we go towards the end of the month and the last phase of our conversation when we talk about Quran, naturally this part of this image of the Holy Prophet is going to be presented. But here, in search of some kind of a blueprint, we really need to focus on the humanistic concept or the image of the Holy Prophet more than anything else. And I also mentioned last night about a book, John Adair, he's a professor as well as what we call it a management guru. In the last couple, at least 2 or 3 decades, from late last century to the early this century, we have begun to notice scholars that have no understanding of Islam, but they are going to look at the character of the Holy Prophet from management point of view, from say as a political leader, and etc., rather than focus on him as a prophet. They are not concerned about the prophet. And most of these characters, when you listen to them, they say, we can say whatever we want about the Holy Prophet, but one thing is a fact, that the Holy Prophet died having united Arabia, ended all the wars and violence, and brought all the tribes together in a peaceful coexistence. That if we look at the history, for many decades, if not centuries, they really had not seen peace between them. And all of this with few means. What makes it so unique is not as if, say, the Holy Prophet was somehow miraculously granted with all the means to be able to overcome the challenges of society. Very few means. A man that had been an orphan, suffered in countless ways, and yet lays the foundation for a religious civilization that changes human history. If we look at it from this angle, that's more than enough. We don't need to even believe in him whether he is prophet or not prophet. How did, as a political leader, as a community leader, as social organizer, how did he do what he did? Now, this is relevant to the question that we posed earlier, and right at the beginning, I said that Islam is going through a turbulent time as well as the Muslims. We are marginalized. Now, playing second fiddle is not what Islam expects us to do. But the problem is, how are we going to conduct our life? What is the parameters or some kind of a blueprint or guidelines that we are going to operate under? This humanistic part becomes an issue. I want to start with the same book with John Adair. Then he mentions a story in his book and uses that to establish the unique characteristics of the Holy Prophet. He says, he cites a story about in the Battle of Badr. One of the inhabitants of Medina by the name of Swadi bin Qadiyah. I haven't come across the story, so I have to check it and see how valid, authentic it is. But it's neither here nor there. But in the way he constructs the story and the way he draws a conclusion from it, it certainly fits within that humanistic image. He says, during the Battle of Badr, as Muhammad, quote unquote, I start, this is his As Muhammad was walking up the line, straightening it with an arrow in his hand, he comes to Swadi, this unique individual, who was standing too far out of line. Stand in line, O Swadi, gently the Holy Prophet reminds this person, while gently pricking his belly with an arrow that he was holding in his hand. You have hurt me, Ya Rasulullah. Swadi responds, God has sent you to teach us about right and justice. So please allow me to retaliate. Take your retaliation, replied the Holy Prophet. So because he poked him in the chest, the Holy Prophet opened his shirt and said, go ahead. So he comes forward and kisses the chest of the Holy Prophet and embraces the Holy Prophet. And what he says is relevant to the conversation that we're going to have today. He said, Ya Rasulullah, you see in front of us the number of people and the strong army. I may not survive this battle. And since this is the last time that I may be with you, I wanted my skin to touch your skin before I depart. And then the Holy Prophet blesses him. Conclusion that he draws. He says, with a leader like Muhammad and a soldier like Swadi, you're not going to retreat and to lose a battle. What's this? Is in essence what he's talking about is that the correlation between and synchronization between the mind and the values of those who are being ruled by the ruler and vice versa. With a leader like that and a soldier like this, you are not going to, once they are synchronized together, their mind and body and soul interact, you're not going to lose a battle. Now, where does this fit for the theme for tonight? Tonight, I want to focus on the life of Imam Hassan salawatullah wasalam alayhi and establish how this synchronization that was part and parcel of the success of the Holy Prophet became absent during the life of latter part of Amir al-Mu'mineen and early part of Imam Hassan. The life of Imam Hassan is full of circumstances, but at least one of them that requires a deeper analysis, and that is the condition, the prevailing condition under which Imam Hassan was forced to sign a peace treaty with Muawiyah. Now, Islam, we all know Islam emerged as a revolutionary idea, and gradually with the coming to power of Khulafa, and particularly Uthman and Bani Umayyah, it turned into some dynasty. Even now in history we talk about Bani Umayyah, Bani al-Abbas. These are dynasties. And so the stance of Imam Hassan and the peace treaty turned the whole thing back into some revolutionary idea that existed right at the beginning. So Islam had to be returned back to its original form. Now, if we move fast forward 30 years, that was Islam at the beginning, under the leadership of the Holy Prophet, with soldiers like Swadi that fully submitting to the command of the leader. 30 years later, after the demise of the Holy Prophet, year 40 after Hijrah, the leadership was not different from the Holy Prophet. Why? Because we have a hadith clearly states, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقْلَيْنِ وَثَقَلَيْنِ كِتَابُ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِي لَا يَفْتَرِقَ. Book and Ahlul Bayt, they are not going to separate حَتَّى يَرِدَ عَلَيَّ الْحَوْض, until they come back to me. So the question was not the absence of a role model or a leadership that exemplifies those values that John Adair or other people have talked about it. Imam Hassan fit with the same category. So it wasn't the absence. But what was it? If Imam Hassan is the same copy of the Holy Prophet, what was it that now we have a group of people that they are prepared to betray, abandon, and even attack that leadership, that pure leadership? If you go to the story of how Imam Hassan was forced into the signing of the peace treaty, because nobody was prepared to stand up and defend. Even his cousin took a bag of money from Muawiyah and late at night disappeared. So what happened when that synchronization is no longer there? One soldier says, Ya Rasulullah, you see the army, I may not survive. My last wish is to touch your skin and be honored with it. And the other one takes a dagger into the thigh of Imam Hassan. Because these are the same, that was the beginning, and this is so-called the byproduct of nearly 40 years. So the result of this was that Islam was turned around. No longer the same kind of revolutionary ideas that came to change the society. Now, who is Imam Hassan? Before we go further, a little bit of biographical account. Imam Hassan was the first grandson of the Holy Prophet. From the marriage of Sayyidah Fatima salamullah alayha and Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was born on the 15th of Ramadan, year 3 after Hijrah. The Holy Prophet, according to the historians and biographers, the Holy Prophet picked him up, recited Adhan and Iqamah in his right and left ear, and named him Hassan. 7 years of his life, early life, under the auspices of the Holy Prophet, and where the Holy Prophet taught them. So the life of Imam Hassan has to be divided into probably 5 phases. Number 1 is the period where he spends with his grandfather. 7 years. The second phase, from the death of his grandfather until the election of his father to become the Khalif, which is close to 35 years or 25 years. And during that period, Imam Hassan witnessed the death of his mother, the marginalization of Ahlul Bayt, the tyranny of Khulafa, the coming to power of Bani Umayyah through Uthman, and etc., etc. Election of his father brings what with it? The rebellion and sedition by Muawiyah, Talha and Zubair, and Aisha and Khawarij. Each one orchestrates one war. Jamal under the leadership of Aisha and Talha and Zubair. Safin, the main character over there is Muawiyah, and Nahrawan is the Khawarij. And then martyrdom of his father, which is the beginning of the period of his imamah, for 6 months only. Finally, he goes to Medina and begins guiding people to the right path, and ultimately to his poison and martyrdom. So these are the general phases. Now, from an Islamic point of view, if we were to assess the political philosophy of Islam, Islam is all about leadership. This is why Ghadir Khum was so critical. Leadership and power of the leader are central to Islam. If this power given to a corrupt leader, the society is going to disintegrate. If the power given to a just leader, then naturally the society is going to be strengthened. The political structure of Islam begins to take shape after the right leader is in place, where that leader guides this political structure, but draws power from the ultimate source. Strangely enough, when we read some of the literatures that are written by Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they talk about such a power. But nobody asks, what was the source of power that they drew, ultimate source of power that they drew from it, the first, second, and third Caliph? Was it the command of the Holy Prophet or the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So what we have here is that if the leadership and the power of the leadership, it becomes necessary, and for the society to succeed, a convergence at the core, the same way that it happened during the life of the Holy Prophet. If the convergence at the core exists, then we have a recipe for success and a strengthening of Islam. Otherwise, Islam disintegrates. Now, during the life of the Imam Hassan alayhi salatu wasalam, real power and overwhelming odds were against the Imam Hassan. Real power, because people didn't say anything, went into the hand of Muawiyah. They didn't stand up. And everybody left Imam Hassan by himself, and Imam Hassan was left with no other option, either or. One of his disciples comes to him critical of his peace treaty with Muawiyah, and he says that, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, you destroyed the image of the believers. And Imam responds, as a matter of fact, if you understand my situation, I saved those little believers that submitted to me. My position now is like the position of Amir al-Mu'mineen immediately after Saqifa. Only 5 people or 6 people were around him, and he was left with no other option to withdraw and say nothing for nearly 25 years. So, in Badr, the society was totally incoherent, and they converge with the core. They believed that if they succeed in the battle against mushrikeen, they have the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if they happen to die, they are martyrs. Ihda al-Husnayn. Now, the society was not prepared to stand up and defend. So that transformation, which is necessary, humans, we go back to the story of Genesis and Wattina wa Zaytun. Quran says that we have created humanity both in the ahsanul khaliqeen and the best of the creation, and asfal as-safilin. These two options are when the value systems upwards or downwards. If the value system becomes higher with the good leadership and perfect example of the leaders, then we have a system that becomes invincible. That's why in the early history of Islam, everyone is surprised, even historians today, they say, how quickly the Holy Prophet and the message that the Holy Prophet brought was able to literally cover the entire Arabian Peninsula. But when humanity sinks and becomes out of tune, remember the warning, the last statement that I left last night. If we lose touch with the source of sacredness, then it becomes problematic. When we sink, and by sinking, our ethical and moral behavior becomes totally distant, the presence of a good leader or articulate leader, even if it was the Holy Prophet, or a copy of the Holy Prophet, which is Amir al-Mu'mineen, or another copy of the Holy Prophet, Ahlul Bayt, are not going to succeed. Why? Because the foundation in the contemporary language, the political base does not exist. Even Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi in Nahj al-Balagha says, God has given us the right to lead. But if the political base does not exist, our life, we go through a turbulent period until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides. So the failure is us. We are the ones that are not prepared to stand up and defend justice. Why? Because of the ethical and moral imbalance. And that's the beginning of the hadith that I recited, a hadith from Imam Hassan salawatullah salam alayhi, that outlines a number of concepts. That it says, halakul mar fi thalath. Total destruction of an individual, if you condense it into three, we talked about the four merits, at least these are part of that. The three, al-kibr, wal-hirs, wal-hasad. Arrogance, envy, greed, and envy. And Imam gives example. The first so-called malaika that was kicked out of heaven because of arrogance. We talked about this before. When Adam realized that he has and Eve, they have made a mistake, what did they do? They went back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asked for forgiveness. What did Shaitan do? Give me some time and I prove to you that you are wrong. That's sheer arrogance. Send him out. Inna ibadi laysa laka alayhim sultan. The true abd and the true servant, you have no power over them. So takabbur and kibr is arrogance that has consequences right from the beginning of our history. Number two, al-hirs. Greed is the enemy of the soul. We constantly want more and more and more and more. We are not, there is a hadith that says, I think from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullah salam alayhi, says material life is like salty water of the sea. For the untrained soul, the more you drink, the thirstier you become, and ultimately it will kill you. And that's in organizing and structuring our priorities. There is another hadith that says, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that says, O son of Adam, put me on the top of your priority, and I put you on the top of my priority. Put me on the bottom of the list, and I'll make you go round and round and round until you drop dead, literally, with my own metaphor. So greed is insatiable character of humans that are not trained, the soul that is not trained. And then عدو النفس وبه خرج آدم من الجنة. Adam was kicked out of heaven because of greed. What did Shaitan do? Came to him and said, I will show you for something. The command is there. I will show you that if you were to eat it or follow it, you're going to be in a better position. He became greedy. And finally, al-hasad, ra'id as-su. It guides you and pushes you towards envy. Envy pushes you towards corruption. And again, another example, two sons of Adam, Habil and Qabil, two brothers, one kills the other because of envy. Why? Because the sacrifice of one was accepted and the sacrifice of the other one was not accepted. So now we are moving into how to structure our life during the few nights that are left. Remember, we talked about this before. Even if we manage to eradicate and remove one negative character during this month, we've done well. It is a total irony that the 30 days with all the benefit comes and we are unable to change anything. That's a disaster. When we become the example of what the Holy Prophet said, the most wretched individual is the one that goes through the month and beyond some thirst and hunger for a few hours, he or she is not going to get anything. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all and keep us safe during the coming nights, and guide us so that we can, if we haven't moved, we use whatever is remaining, the opportunities during this month to change a little. It's better than nothing. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.